around families my entire career, from working in foster care as a caseworker, teaching parenting to parents, teaching life skills, trying to keep families together. As a therapist, I've worked in addictions and trying to help parents in recovery improve their parenting skills. And I came to CPCD to work with the little ones about 4 years ago. So a little bit about CPCD. So we are the Head Start preschool grantee in El Paso County. We have a total of 69 classrooms throughout the county, and we partner with many more local child care agencies to provide comprehensive support and education. In my department of behavioral health, what we're responsible for is the social emotional learning for the kiddos in our care, learning about feelings, coping skills, friendship skills, problem solving, supporting these skills both in the classroom and in the family home, and supporting families, children, and staff with education about mental health related topics and helping with community referrals as needed.
Great, thank you. Next, we have Anne Hersom, who is a developmental interventionist with the Resource Exchange. Hi, Anne. Can you give us a brief description of yourself and your role?
Sure. So my name is Anne Hersom. You just got that. I am a developmental interventionist and then autism specialist. I work at the Resource Exchange. If you have not heard of the Resource Exchange, we serve people with disabilities birth through end of life, but I am in the early intervention side, so birth through 3. And a little bit about us, we serve over 1,000 children every year, and we are free, which is nice. So if a child has a developmental delay in any area, that can be fine motor, gross motor, language, social, emotional, cognition, or adaptive, then we pick them up. And we've got physical therapists and occupational therapists, somebody like me. So we kind of serve the gamut there. So if there is any questions, and I can put a plug in because we're a nonprofit, and we do serve the community, and there is a concern about a developmental delay, the Resource Exchange, and I'm sure Jenny can provide information, and I can as well. But I've worked with kids, birth through age 19 for a lot of years, so that could date me. So I won't go too far, but we'll just say over 20. But early intervention is my favorite because of all that happens with the brain development and just how much impact you can make. So that's, I think, a little bit about me. Nice to meet everybody.
All right, thank you. And next we have Paula Hergert. Paula is a prevention and policy specialist with the Maternal Child Health Program at El Paso County's Health Department. Can you please introduce yourself to us?
Hello, my name is Paula Hergert, and like Jenny said, I am one part of the Maternal Child Health Program at El Paso County Public Health. And you will be hearing, I think, next month from the other side of our organization. Jenny, if I'm correct, HCP
I believe
will
so.
be with you next time in their care coordination. So different from Wendy and Anne, my focus is more on education and training with the goal of helping our community understand the long-term impact of developmental trauma, relational childhood trauma, and what we're seeing is all of the behavior coming out in school by the time they're 5, 6, 7, and then it just continues through high school. So the goal for my position is to help people understand the neurodevelopment, like Anne was talking about, and how important it's so fun to see all the parents of 1-year-olds and expecting this is the most important time in your child's life with you and your relationship, and that's the message we're trying to get out and help families help their little ones to be the best they can be. And so I'd have to say that's the role. And though I taught high school, I'm understanding now the enormous importance of these first years in a child's life. And it's actually become a passion now. And so I'll probably be working for many years here on out. Just saying.
Very nice. All right, well, thank you guys for sharing that information with us. We are ready to open the floor. So if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat or into the Q&A function down at the bottom. Just a reminder, it's just the panelists and hosts that have their videos on today. So let's get started. Who would like to start with our first question? I'm just checking the chat to make sure there's nothing that's popped up in there. Well, are there any questions that you tend to get more frequently for any of our panelists?
So let me kind of throw some ideas maybe out there for the parents to have questions. So Jenny, you talked about we're dealing with behavior and overall development, a lot of social emotional, like the effect of what Paula's talking about is your relationship and that idea of how the technical term you might have heard is attunement. How do you connect with your child? So I deal with language, I deal with behavior, I deal with potty training, I deal with sleep. As a developmental interventionist, I'm kind of global. So if you have questions about like what's typical behavior or what isn't typical behavior, or what can you maybe expect, anything like that. I don't know if that kind of gets some ideas flowing for people.
We do have a couple questions that have popped up. The first one is, what are your opinions or feelings on early elimination teachings for potty training?
Okay, so making sure we, and you may have to type this, but making sure that we are understanding the same language. Tell me what your definition of early elimination training is.
Is that to the person that asked that? Can you put that in the chat? So we have another question that came in. So let's see. Oh, elimination training, meaning. Panelists, are you able to see the Q&As? No? Okay.
How about we do
this? Go ahead. Like starting putting baby on potty as early as 4 weeks.
Yes. Okay. So that's what I thought you were meaning. So what is my opinion on that? So I've worked with parents. I worked with families that have done that, and I had an amazing little gal who that worked with. And so I think in terms of what research shows, and we do have some information and some articles that I know Jenny's going to share with you, some sites, and I have a couple things on potty training. One of the real brief articles I have is that there's a lot of different strategies that can work across different children. And so what I would say, my discussion with parents is there's signs like and I'm going to go kind of two directions with this. I'll talk about a little bit more about the early elimination potty training, and then a little bit more about if you're wanting to wait for potty training. And there's things that kind of signal the idea that that your child is ready for potty training. So what I would recommend with potty training is you individualize based on how your child responds, because that early elimination potty training, I've never done that particularly myself, so I'm not an expert or really versed in that, but I've worked with parents who have had some success with that. But I think your kiddo, in terms of really being aware of those cues, I mean, they're not going to be aware of those cues. And I think what it is a parent needs to be aware of the cues, and you kind of see that, the body language and all that. But I think that when you try a method with a child that is not working and you get that pushback or that kickback, and then it becomes, and that may be a little bit older than what you're talking about, which is a baby, then you engage in a power struggle. And that can create, not necessarily, I mean, I don't want to use the word trauma because that's definitely a big word, but it can be traumatic in the sense that a kiddo is like, I am not ready. And then because you can't, force someone to go to the bathroom, right? And so when it becomes an issue of force, then there becomes a polarization and you don't move forward. So when you're working with your child in any area, you want to eliminate that power struggle if you're trying to get them to move forward. So I don't know if that answers your question. And you can put on the text if you want a little more elaboration in the chat box, I mean.
Oh. Okay. This is from Becca. It is as important for mothers to be in baby's life in the first 3 years. Is it as it is the father? Are they equal in importance, or is it specifically important for only mom to be in baby's life for the first 3 years? I've heard that specifically for moms. Not only if mom is breastfeeding, even if parents are choosing to bottle/formula feed only. Is it still important for mom to be in baby's life the first 3 years? And as I said before, for mom and dad to be involved 100% of the time, or at least 70%, or as much as possible. By the way, I was the one who also asked the first question about elimination training. I didn't realize it wasn't necessarily important for it to be on the Q&A panel. It's helpful, but it's not, you don't have to.
I'll start this conversation a little bit. I don't think there's a percentage. The most important thing is that, so Anne started talking about this, that the caretaker has, there's 3 things that happen very young, and that's an attachment to a safe adult. And this is going to have foundation for the rest of this person's life. This idea of attunement, and that's understanding and being able to read specific cues for that one child. If there's a family of 5 children, each child will have slightly different needs, and being attuned to that one child, because they're communicating through body language or behavior, being attuned to that behavior, almost like Anne was saying, before it happens. And then through that, this becomes this regulation, but this all is happening 0 to 3, and impact for literally for the rest of a child's life. Not saying things can't change, but it is the foundational part of their relational template, their regulation template. So that's Anne and Wendy, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, a little bit. I think you summed it up really well, Paula. What is important, it's not a percentage, it's about the quality more so than the quantity. So when a parent, a grandparent, a caregiver of any kind is present, they are present. They are not on the phone or doing other things to whatever extent we can. We're all busy parents. I'm a parent too. But being that time in, because it's that time in that's going to really help you build that attachment, that bond, that attunement, and connecting with the kid. So unfortunately, it's not as clear cut as a percentage. But the more healthy, caring adults a child has in their life, that's fantastic. But they need at least one at least. Hey, the more the merrier. But if they got one, that's a pretty darn good start.
We have another, there's a comment in the Q&A section. It says, my daughter is showing signs of readiness for potty training, and we are wanting to prepare her. She potties sporadically, but it's not consistent yet. And then let's see, the next one is, I have a 15-month-old. I'm wondering how early to start potty training. He's doing great with speech and fine with gross motor skills. I don't want to start him too early. And the other issue is that his father and I are not together and live in different cities, but he wants 50-50 custody. And I was wondering how to handle this if he disagrees.
Okay, so in relation to potty training, I have an article and I'm gonna read to it. I can probably rattle it off, but I don't want to miss anything. In terms of, sorry, you're gonna hear my dogs bombing this video, so that's going in the recording in the backyard. I'm on a meeting right now. I can.
8 o'clock.
Yeah, I know. I'm working right now.
At 8?
Yes, I need you to shut the door, please. And that's teenagers. So if you've got a 1-year-old or 2-year-old, my teenager just came in. So in talking about potty training, I'm sorry, guys. I thought everybody, I had just had this gut feeling that he would pop in. Okay, so I'm gonna list some signs of readiness training or readiness to potty train. So they need to stay dry for at least 2 hours at a time, or when they wake up from a nap, they wake up dry. They recognize that they're urinating or having a bowel movement. So if you have a little kiddo, a lot of times, especially with bowel movements, they will go into another part of the room, another part of the house, underneath the table, and they will hide themselves while they're having a bowel movement, which just to this day cracks me up. Are they developing physical skills that are critical to potty training? So again, walking, and this kind of goes to that elimination training. So there definitely is a different theory of thought, but are they able to walk? Are they able to pull up their pants up and down? So help navigate that potty training, be a part of it, that idea of shared control. Do they copy a parent's toilet behavior? So if you have like a little toilet, do they come and sit down on it? Do they want to give you toilet paper? I mean, it sounds silly, but they want to be a part. Do they follow you into the bathroom? And if you're, a parent of a toddler, you know that you may never get a break. And that may be because they are following you into the bathroom. I've got 3 older boys. Another one that's really important, and this is language-based, can they follow simple directions? So can they lift up a toilet seat? Do they understand what pulling, pants down? And so that receptive language is really important. And then the other thing, and I talked about this a little bit, that's really important is, are they interested in it? And this is where you're eliminating that power struggle. And I'll give you a really quick, my son would kill me, my oldest, but really quick personal example. He was almost 3. All my kids, boys, right before 3 is when they wanted to do it. And I just kind of followed their interests. So he was talking, he was alert, and we decided to do it. And so we went through a whole day. He made it the whole day. I was so excited. I said, this is the easiest thing ever. I can't believe how great this is. The next day we woke up and he said, I want a diaper. And I was like, you want a what? We just had a great day. Like, I'm done with diapers. Like, this is so great. And in my mind, and I know how to do this stuff, I had to cognizantly tell myself, put the diaper on and do not make this a power struggle. And I said, okay, with a smile on my face, let's go get one. So we put on a diaper, he wore it for the day, and the next day he said, I'm ready to do the potty training. And so I eliminated that power struggle. And I often wonder, had I gone back and made that a battle, what would that have looked like versus, what I did? And so I think that that's a big deal, is just don't make it a battle. And they're learning too. You have to understand their little life. They don't understand what's going on. Some kiddos, when they're not ready, if they have an accident, they become very upset by it. They're really rattled by that, and they don't have that understanding of how to navigate this. And so that goes a little bit to what Paula was saying about that idea of the first 3 years of life being so important with that attachment and then attunement. Your children you help regulate your children. So, and I'm going off toileting a little bit, but I think this is just such an important topic. If you think of a megaphone, and so, a megaphone starts out really narrow, you yell through it and it gets really wide. When a baby is born, their ability to regulate themselves, it was like nothing. They don't. They cry. They need to be fed. That's how and they need you to regulate. As they age, especially through age 3, and they get a little bit older, and then you reach 2 and you got the tantrums, they need your help to regulate. They don't know how to do it. And part of tantruming in 2 years old is like, I have a tantrum, I don't get my way, life is terrible, I'm dysregulating, and that's okay because that's normal. And then I learn to come back down. And it's like, oh, that's how that works. right? And so that idea, as that megaphone gets bigger, is that idea of our lifespan. The goal, as we near adults, is as we get farther and farther that we learn to regulate by ourselves. But the goal of the parent is that, and this is what Paula was saying, that if I have a safe attachment with my parent and I know that life is secure, then I feel secure to go explore. And so if you go out with your little kiddo, they might go out and explore a little bit, and then they come back and they check in with you because they feel safe. And so that relationship, and that's what I always bring back. And it's not like you're not going to have struggles, and none of us on this panel expect you to be a perfect parent. You're going to do a lot of things wrong. You're going to be tired. You're going to be hangry. I mean, that's all about it being human being. But it's about, how do you come back? How do you regroup? And you will model for your child. As you regroup, they learn to regroup. So I know that was a long answer to potty training. And this information is, in the articles as well.
No, I thought that was really great information. Paula or Wendy, do you have anything to add to that before we move on to the next?
Since we were talking about attachment and attunement, I think I just thought briefly this question about the mother. Do you see that question in there? Importance of the mother.
Yes.
In a child's life. And I think, of course, that maternal, that relationship is bar none. If that relationship is safe.
Are you looking at the part that says?
I think the initial question there was a question on percentage, and then male, female, mom, dad, and see what Wendy and Anne think. But yeah, that maternal, there's nothing like that bond if that is a safe, healthy, in tune attachment. That is a very important relationship. Anne and Wendy, how do you want to address that? If it's the father that's that attached,
I don't think
it needs that one safe person. And in like what Wendy was saying, if there's two, oh my God, isn't that wonderful?
Mm-hmm.
But that child needs to know there's that one person that, and I keep coming back to safe.
And it doesn't matter, mother, father, grandparent.
They are emotionally safe. They are physically safe. They're safe in every aspect. And like what Anne was saying, that allows them then, as they grow mature, to take those steps out and come back. So to take those risks, because they always have a safe base to come to. And they'll do that as teenagers if that pattern is set.
Correct.
Young, those teenagers that act like they can't stand you, but then they're going to come back.
Exactly.
So
and I was reading a little bit in that chat that the example of if, the mom staying home and the dad should go, either way, whatever works for that family is what's going to work best for that baby, because if whichever parent is home is healthy and happy and functioning with the sleep deprivation and all that stuff, but then dad comes home and he's engaged, it's great. If there's resentment, if there's discord and fighting, that's going to negatively impact. Paul, am I making sense here? It's not necessarily mom versus dad, it's the whole situation.
I think what you're talking there about environment, and we need to remember that biography becomes biology. And whatever that family can do to create a safe, healthy, as low stress as possible, environment, do that. Exactly what you're saying. If it works best for dad to be home, dad be home. If it's best for mom to work together. But what we're finding now, that nature is mostly, until a child is born, And then it's nurture and environment that really take over in the development of the child. So yes, I agree.
We've got another question here. Physical encounters like touching a hot stove have a clear consequence, but at what age do you believe a child can learn abstract consequences for their actions? For example, a consequence for not cleaning up when they finish playing with a toy.
I'll start a little bit and then I'll let these two take it, but abstract thought is a long ways away. We're talking the brain develops from the bottom up, inside out. This part of the brain that is abstract thought, though it's there, but it's not really on board yet when kids are little. So if we can figure out a way that the consequence is always a natural consequence, not an abstract consequence, it has to be a natural consequence. Do you all want to help on what would be a good consequence for not putting toys away?
That I can talk about. We do that a lot in the preschool classroom. So it's, and Paula's right, the type of abstract thought that really doesn't come about until much later outside of the age group that we're talking about. However, kids from infants learn about cause and effect, and we can take advantage of that with natural consequences like Paula's talking about. And what we teach parents, what we teach teachers, is that those natural consequences or consequences that kind of match, so cleaning up, making it age appropriate. So maybe they don't clean up all the toys. Maybe we start with one, we clean up one, we get success, yay. So next time we're going to try two, and we're going to kind of build on those successes to help them learn what happens when you clean up and what happens when you don't. That's kind of the approach we take. Did I answer that?
I just want to add, I like how you brought in that idea of cause and effect. When you think about development, and if you think about a baby's development, so as they mature, like birth through age 1 is really more of that, as they learn what play is, it's more of that cause and effect, what that means in the play. So like, banging, bringing hands together, there's a lot of imitation, there's that repetition, they do something over and over again, grabbing papers, dropping things, oh my gosh, that's a big one. Shaking something rattles, that's cause and effect. Like, oh wow, when I shake this, something happens. So this is really cool. And then as they develop from 1 year to 2 years, then and as they develop language, that play starts to expand. So then they might like take a phone and they're like, oh, I see you doing it, I'm going to copy. I'm going to pretend to talk on a phone. I'm going to pretend to feed my dog. That idea of edible versus inedible objects. So as their brain matures, because that's how they learn through relationships, they learn through imitation and repetition, and they learn through play. Their world is play. They imitate you. They pick up a broom. They want to vacuum like you. That won't last, I promise. That will change, but it's fun, and it's, so enjoy that while that lasts. But so when the abstract is way farther, but what they're talking about is concrete. And if you could look up stages of development and kind of see that Piaget's stages of development is one that talks about the different developmental stages, but I won't go into that right now. So they can learn how to, they start learning how to share, around 18, 15 months, like that training, that idea of giving back, but they don't really understand the concept. Their world is very egocentric, which is what it needs to be really, so they can continue to learn, because they learn through repetition. So, but I really like what Wendy said too, was they don't necessarily have to pick up a whole room, because that's going to be overwhelming, but can they pick up a couple toys? And as they develop, so just to give a marker, age 3 is when they really understand, or start to more understand, what sharing is. They don't really have an understanding of what does sharing mean. And so that kind of gives you hopefully a little bit of a glimpse into development. Hopefully that helps.
I think the mirror neurons are very important to understand, and kids really like to do what you're doing. So it may start where they're helping you, right? Pick up toys. Make it something that you're doing together. If there's relationship involved, that's a wonderful thing.
All right, we've got our next question here. It says, we're attachment responsive style parents here, so we're not entirely sure what the ideal potty training route would be for us. So far, we've bought a potty for exposure. He sees us use the toilet. He uses us when he's gone, and he leans his body like gas and poop. No idea with pee yet. However, he'll have dry diapers. I wonder if he's holding in or just this time, sorry, I wonder if he's holding in or just this time, other times no. Of course, we're lax about it and think he's young. We'd love resources to explore, and we will be sharing some resources about that. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
Sorry, Anne. Attachment style parenting and such myself. And with my son, it sounds like you're on the right track. You have the potty out, you're talking about it, you're exposing him to it. And so you're on the right track. Keep following his lead and kind of using some of the tips that Anne has already mentioned. 2 thumbs up. Nice work.
All right. Next question. I have a behavior question about my 15-month-old. He's a great communicator, 3 to 4 word sentences, listens and responds, 150 word vocabulary, etc. Lately, when I give him a direction or ask him a question, he has been ignoring me and continuing with whatever he's doing. I can always stay calm and repeat in a soothing voice the direction or question, but usually he still ignores me if he's not interested in what I'm saying. I was wondering if you have any helpful tips.
Sorry, we don't mean to laugh. We've just been through this. It is cute. Well, let me say development. Did I hear right? He's 15 months. Wow, that's a big vocabulary and a 3 to 4 word phrase or sentence for a person that young is pretty great. Following one-step directions. I guess my question is, you continue to repeat. How many times do you have to repeat for him to respond? And do you feel like, and I'm not saying he's not, but is he really ignoring, or is he so focused on what he's doing that he's not kind of cluing into what's around him? So I guess I could maybe answer both. That's since we don't get to see you guys. If he's really ignoring you, which is highly possible because they want to do what they want to do. That's their little world. I guess my question would be, what strategies are you doing? Are you coming down and getting to his level, kind of that face-to-face, that interaction, and just, real gently repeating mommy. So let's say the example was, and maybe you can type an example of a direction you might give that he's ignoring. So that would be helpful. But let's say you said, we have to go bye-bye, and he didn't want to go bye-bye. And so maybe sometimes we have to come around and do that face-to-face, and mommy said we have to go bye-bye. If it's an issue of transition where he or she does not want to leave what they're doing because they're focused and they're having fun, I would encourage you to use language like, first we're doing this, then we're doing this. So if it's something that they don't want to transition to, that then needs to be fun. First, we're going to clean up. Then we can play with, let's say, the dinosaur. I'm just throwing out strange ideas. Or I've got a parent whose kid does not want to go in the car. And so we came up with, and you got to think kind of out of the box, like what are fun little strategies that's going to hook your little person to want to be engaged. And what I always try to remind parents is to remember where your child is developmentally and what can they understand and what can't they understand. So we had a little backpack that went only in the car. And so this little is very food oriented, and I'm not big on using food as a reinforcer. I'll just tell you, sometimes we have to use it, but he's so hungry, he's in a growth spurt that we use that. And then we had also a fun little backpack. And this little person was a doer, and he liked things that took action or activity. He was a little problem solver. So we said that little backpack, that little fun thing, we only do it in the car. So first we go to the car, then we can get in the backpack, so then it's fun. It's something to look forward to. So I don't know if it's kind of hard to answer some of these questions because, there's a lot of dynamics around behavior. I think the one thing I would really like to get across with behavior is all behavior is a form of communication. And so sometimes we might call a behavior challenge behavior, hitting, kicking, biting. That can be challenging. Well, it is challenging. It's not can be challenged, but sometimes biting is a sensory thing. Sometimes it's not meant to be malicious. Sometimes it's just like, I'm exploring and that's the only way I know how to explore. Now that's not what we want to do because that's going to put off people around us. And we want behaviors that are socially appropriate. But behavior, whether it's, that idea of appropriate or inappropriate, sometimes if a kiddo doesn't have words, if there's a language delay, they get really frustrated and they act out. And we as parents, because we're tired, and if we're not armed with this knowledge, then we get frustrated and we get angry. But also understand that, and I'm stepping on Wendy, you can speak to this, or Paula, but anger is a secondary emotion. There's always something behind that. So if you find yourself getting really angry or frustrated, sometimes as an adult, you kind of have to stop and say, what is this about? What is behind this? And it could be disappointment. Like, I'm disappointed my kid is not doing the language, and I'm frustrated because I'm tired of dealing with this, and that's okay. That's human. But then as an adult, how are you going to deal with that so your little person can, have that attunement? Because think about if you're married or you have in a relationship, if someone comes in stressed, you feel that. You feel their anger, you feel their tension. That's attunement. Your child feels you. So if you're anxious or you're depressed or you're frustrated, they're going to feel that. And that's not that that's wrong, but it's like, how do we deal with it?
Absolutely. And I just want to add on one quick thing to what you were saying. When you said maybe the little person is so into what they're doing that they weren't really ignoring you. They were just super focused, in order to eliminate that, tapping them on the little shoulder and making sure you have eye contact when you ask them. Another strategy that you can use is 11 logic, control through choices. So you can use first we do this, then we do that. Or you give two choices that you are truly okay with either one. Trying to get into the car. Do you want to get in by yourself or do you want me to pick you up? Sometimes it doesn't seem like those are choices, but that's still a sense of control for them. And that can really help empower them and help them with their development.
Thank you, Wendy. And that shared control is huge.
All right, we've got another question here. It says, my baby just turned 1 year old, actually 10 months adjusted. And thanks to the pandemic, she hasn't been around other babies yet. I look forward to when I feel comfortable enough for her to socialize with her peers. At what age does lack of peer socialization start to really affect development?
So when Anne was talking earlier about the different levels of play, that's kind of going to come into effect here. And this is a question that we'll find out the effects of COVID and the impact on social emotional development. But the good news is when we're talking about a child this young, they got plenty of time to rebound and get those because they're also still building those relationship skills with you, with their parents, with anybody else that they come into contact with. So while we want them to have peer relationships and be able to have that interaction, as long as they're still having interactions with the people they live with, that's still a pretty good start and they'll catch up pretty quick. They'll catch up.
And parallel play takes, that's going to last a while where kids, they don't really play with each other. They may play side by side, and when they've had enough, they're ready to go. And I think like we've been when it does finally happen, just be attuned and don't push kids into what they aren't ready for.
All right, we've got another question here, similar, it's different, but about redirection of behavior. It says, I have a 17-month-old who likes to hit and pull hair. What are some ideas for working with her to redirect or change those behaviors?
Redirection is always beautiful. Redirection is my favorite tool for children and adults, just saying. But, you know, part of it is also becoming behaviors communication. So it's looking at, is she trying to get your attention? Is she playing and she doesn't realize that that it's getting rough, that it hurts? So, you know, if your hair gets pulled, ow, that hurts. That hurts me. And say, you know, if you want my attention, tap my shoulder and start working on those skills and teaching. We always want to teach children what we want them to do, not just what we don't want them to do. So pay attention to when the hair pulling is happening or when any behavior is happening, because that's going to help you redirect and teach them what you want them to do.
I'd also like to add that, so when you're thinking when he was talking about like what's happening before. So if you think about, there's a term, it's called ABC, and A stands for antecedent, or was what's happening before. Behaviors is B, you know, and then C is a consequence. So the behavior would be pulling hair, you know, biting, pinching, anything that you don't want them to do. What's happening right before that? So let's say they're not getting the attention that they want. So they pull hair. The consequence is they get attention. And sometimes children don't know the difference between positive attention and negative attention. They just want attention. So if they get a response and a response is what they were after, they're going to repeat that behavior. You've just reinforced it. So think about what is a purpose. Could it be sensory based? Is there a reason that they like to? One of my little guys used to like to do that to my hair and then pull. I was like, that hurts, but it was more sensory based. And so I had to teach him that idea of replacement behavior. They're not going to know what to do if you don't teach them. So if you think about a lot of times as parents, and I did this, it's like, I wish I knew then what I know now. So I love teaching this, but if you think about no, don't, or stop. What I try to have parents use those, and it's not that they're wrong or bad, but try to use those more for emergency words, because they're not teaching. So if they're going to touch a hot stove, absolutely no, don't, or stop. But if we use those words so much that they begin to tune us out and they don't mean anything and they don't know what to do, then we're not moving forward with anything. So for instance, a lot of kids like to climb on furniture and jump off, and you're worried that that's a safety concern. No, don't stop. That's okay. But what are you teaching them? Feet on floor. So, or what can we jump on? So that's that idea of redirection. If we're climbing on the table and we want to jump off the table and that's a safety concern, can you bring some cushions off the couch and jump on the couch? Like, this is what we can do instead. So we give them something that's appropriate in replacement of the behavior that's not appropriate, and understand that a behavior that is always already set is harder to change than a new behavior. It takes time. So be patient. If you try some of these strategies, you're like, they're not working. They may not work overnight, but it's that idea of repetition. Eventually they're going to know. And it's that idea of, what are your limits? What are the boundaries that you as a parent are comfortable with putting in place for your child? And only you can decide what, there's parents that they're a little bit more loose. They're more risk takers themselves, and they're okay if their child climbs. So, it's just what, as long as of course we're safe here, but it really has to match who you are as parents.
All right. Let's see, our next question. I think this might be a follow-up to one of the previous comments. It says, sometimes ignoring, sometimes focused. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the 15-month-old. Sometimes focused, I come down to say gently, look at mommy, please, and then repeat, put your clothes in the hamper. Sometimes listens, she sometimes doesn't. So yeah, I think that was a follow-up to that last one. Another question here. We are experiencing another baby girl at the end of June, and our daughter will be 2 years old when she arrives. Is there any advice for the change in family dynamic for smooth transition from one child to having another baby in the house? We would appreciate any and all advice with sharing of mommy's attention, especially when our 2-year-old is still breastfeeding.
I think I think kids always surprise us. For one, I just want to throw that out there where we worry as parents that they're not going to handle things well, and they tend to surprise us. So keep that in the back of your mind. But making sure that you're talking before baby comes and that she's a part of things. If there's a baby shower or something, there's a big sister shower, that she's just a part of this whole process. That always helps. Making sure that you have date time with your 2-year-old after baby comes, where she gets mommy's undivided attention, for certain times or for certain things that you are the mommy does this for me as much as possible, right? And include her with the baby, have her sit with you while you're feeding, while, taking turns, and give her her own little baby to take care of. That's another great thing, because it's that mimicry. They want to be like us, right? So give her a baby to hold and feed, and that'll help too.
Jenny, I see something in the chat I wanted to address related to ADD or ADHD.
Sure.
So I've worked in the elementary school as well, and I do have some experience with ADA and ADD. Paula, you may want to address this as well, being in the school for so long, and Wendy as well. They typically do not or will not diagnose ADD until, I think it's the earliest is 5 is what I've seen. And so I see that you have a concern, it's in your family, and you're wondering if there's any signs for a baby. I haven't seen that, and I've worked, with children birth through 5 for a long time. I would try to, the best you can, because it seems like that's a pretty big concern for you, is try to just calm your fears and enjoy this time with your child, because you never get time back. That's one thing we don't get back. And children are so precious, and they're, and this little side thought, I worked with a clinical psychologist at once with a kiddo who had ADD, and he had a very interesting, and he's actually in town. His name is Dr. Drodes. But he has a very interesting perspective on ADD. And he said, I don't view ADD as necessarily something gone wrong. But he said, if you think about those people, and this was his example he used, who are sitting around the equator, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so hot. I'm so hot. Everyone's saying I'm so hot. And then you have one person with ADD, and they're like, what are we going to do about it? And they're going to be the one that goes out and maybe invents something or creates something, or they're going to be your emergency care doctor, because they will live on the edge, or your EMT driver, or, so try to look at it. And I understand that it can be really challenging dealing with somebody with ADD if you're not, but trying to look at it through a different lens would be my encouragement, while just trying to live in that moment. Paula really talked about living in that moment with that human being. And Paula, you may want to respond to, what I'm saying here, but I know that that's a big deal. I have people in my life who have ADD. And so there are issues that are challenging, but I'm more regimented. I like my plan. I like my list. I'm probably not as fun. I mean, those people are fun, the people in my life. And I say though, because I don't want to call them out here, but we all have gifts and we all have strengths, in areas that we're just not so strong with. So I hope that helps. Paula, is there anything you want to speak to that, or Wendy?
I was just going to say, diagnostically speaking, it won't be diagnosed until the child's in school for the most part, because that's where you start to see, because that's where things should start to settle down and it becomes evident. Paula?
Well, I think we're going to see a shift in school too, that let's try to, like you guys were talking about a replacement, let's change a behavior with an appropriate one. So teaching kids, if they're starting to feel dysregulated, you aren't seeing, we see the need now for some kids to be moving. They're going to learn best if they can pace in the back of the room, or they have a fidget toy or a bicycle thing underneath their desk. We are seeing now that it's not sit and listen and get as much anymore. And I'm kind of with Anne and Wendy. Enjoy them now. Let them, find their way. Hopefully, as a parent, you can let some of that worry go, because what we've been talking about, kids will pick up on it. They're so attuned. They're so attuned to our body language. Just try to relax, keep yourself regulated, have fun and enjoy, and go from there. Let things fall into place. But I do think when a child does get into school, we're seeing different strategies used now, instead of just medicating a kid or doing things that shame them for a behavior. It's not their fault. So yeah, that's my thought on that.
All right, I know we're running out of time here. We do have a couple more questions in the chat. One is, do you have any resources on classes for child development and parenting strategies? There will be a handout that it'll probably get emailed out either tonight or tomorrow, along with the survey link. So if any of the panelists have other things that they'd like to add to that list too, you can feel free to send those to me and I can add them to the list based on the things we've talked about tonight. And then looks like our last question for the night. She writes, "You've all been great. Thank you again for this space. Another question that comes up for us is, I'm getting my husband on board with certain nuances of toddlerhood raising. So culturally wasting food for him is a no, making a mess, and he expresses it. I feel like referee sometimes. Even I find myself getting annoyed at our 20-month-old for dropping food. And the other part is that I say, wait, I know that he's just a baby. They do this, no big deal. We can talk to him. We can tell him we don't drop food. It's for eating. It'll pass. Honestly, it's almost like we've got other siblings here. I don't like more work either, but this is a part of being a parent. Kids are messy. Well, what can I do to get my husband to understand that toddlers truly need to be messy to learn, paint, sand, and make mess? This is all okay to just let go. Sorry. Is there any good science piece that I can share with him?
I don't know about science, but I can share this. My husband has very many qualities, seems to be in line with yours. And I'm very much, it's messy, there's glitter everywhere. I can personally empathize with the struggle, feeling like a referee, trying to do what you feel is best for your child, but it drives your husband crazy. And that is a very exhausting, tough place to be. I think what I would encourage you to do not only is to show scientific stuff, but keep having these conversations. If you haven't already, talk about the impact this is having on you. And maybe you can find a middle ground. I'm only half joking. I do the messy projects when my husband's not here. Or when I know he's doing something else, I'll tell him, don't come in this room right now. You don't want to see what's happening. That was our compromise. It doesn't have to be everyone's. But if you talk through it with him over time, hopefully you guys can find a middle ground.
So I'm trained in a feeding procedure called SOS, and it's a sensory-based feeding procedure. And Jenny, I'll send some things on development related to food, and then also a class that we offer for parenting as well in town. And Wendy, I'm sure you might have some through the CPCD parenting as well. So I think what might be helpful, and what Wendy was talking about, was coming together. What's that middle ground? but also really looking at what is developmental, which I think you're clued into, but you're feeling that stress trying to be that go-between. But maybe having your husband, if he's willing, and so that would be my question, is he willing to look at what is development? One thing that we do with children to teach them, again, it's that replacement behavior, and it is so typical for kids just to drop. And then if that behavior gets kind of set, that's what I do, that's what I remember. So then we'll bring a bowl, something to a high chair, and we're like, oh, we put the food in here. And again, you have to teach that, make it a game, make it fun, make them want. A lot of when you're teaching is you become animated, like, oh, I have the blue bowl. Food I don't want to eat goes in the blue bowl. What color bowl do you want? So then you're pulling in Wendy's idea of, now there becomes some shared control, because it's not like you're going to put the food in the bowl. It's like, well, I don't want to put the food in the bowl. I've been putting the food on the floor, and I'm 2. And so now this just became a power struggle, and I'm going to win because I'm 2. Because you're not going to necessarily win a power struggle. Because what happens with a power struggle, and many of you, if you haven't been there, you will. And if you have been there, you know what it's like. It can become a disaster, and a disaster is not a win. That's just a disaster. You end up feeling bad as a parent, your child's crying. It's not that they're not going to cry when a limit is set, but you kind of have to say, what is my goal here? And so bringing teaching to it, and children learn through sensory and touch and eating, actually. And I know that there's different cultural perspectives to this. And so I would have to understand what that is to address that. And I absolutely respect that. But developmentally, if you look at what is normal developmentally, then that may help your husband say, okay, this drives me crazy. And so the compromise may be, okay, well, let's at least put it in a bowl, which is a good teaching thing anyway. We don't want our kid throwing food on the floor. If there's a dog in the area, that could be reinforcing, because that's fun. Like, drop, oh, he got it, yay, cause and effect. Right? So thinking about where they developmentally, I think that helps parents a lot when they understand that this behavior is normal. And you might need like a fact sheet, like, this is normal milestone. What can we, if we can't do anything about it, how can, like Wendy's saying, how can we compromise? And I'll put some stuff on for feeding. I forgot to mention that I work on feeding too.
And Anne, would you agree power and control really doesn't change behavior?
No.
It doesn't teach a new skill.
Mm-mm.
And so that idea about replacing the behavior with the good one.
Right.
And having fun with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for young, because they're at this point where, even though there's a battle because they're 2 and they're learning that independence, and that independence that they're fighting for is how they learn. Because if they're not wanting that independence and they're not wanting to grow, if they're not showing that creativity and motivation, which goes back to what Paula was talking about, that I feel safe enough to co-explore. But if they're not wanting to do that, because I've worked with kids through the Department of Human Services, I come in because they don't have the motivation and they don't want to be creative because they don't feel safe. So they basically sit there. And so, which is really sad. And so we have to work on, okay, how do we provide that feeling of safety and security now so they want to grow? I lost my train of thought there for a second.
All right. I'm so sorry. I have to end things now. But there's been some really great discussions. If there are other ways that people can get in touch with you, let me know, and we can, if you're okay with that, we can add your contact information possibly to that sheet for them, or the other resources to help them with their, because it looks like we still got questions coming in, but I really have to cut it off. But it was great to have you all here. Thank you so much for your expertise. Remember, tomorrow when you get that information, participants, you'll also get the survey link, and when you fill out that survey link, you will be able to be entered for both of the drawings that I mentioned earlier. And there are going to be more Parenting Little Ones sessions coming up, so I hope you can tune into those too. Though turns out this has been there will be more of these. They've been going pretty well for the library district. So again, thank you everybody for attending tonight, and it was really great to meet all of you.